Welcome back, my little friends, to the chess cold that just won't go away.
Maybe you have Captain Trips from the Stand. It's finally happening. Stephen King book. It's about the end of the world.
This is what I did. Moving on to things that are of relevance, and look at this. Look at this beautiful course. The Ohio River, right here.
It is beautiful.
Rolling hills, golf, and now I'm back talking to you.
Sorry.
Yeah, you should be. You should be.
I think my neighbor is cutting down every single tree in his yard.
Well, that's too bad.
That's what it sounds like.
Maybe that's just I don't know. I got nothing. I got nothing other than no voice. Partially, I have no voice too because I was screaming on the golf course a lot because, as you do at many charity events, there was a minor amount of alcohol involved. Just minor.
Yep.
And good times, good buddies, just people in front of us. I've never intentionally driven my golf ball into more people than I did Saturday.
Jeez. Wow. I hope that's a low number, regardless of what your new record is.
Yeah, the problem was the people in front of us. So typically when you go golfing, it's like 4 people per hole.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the way they did this, because there's so many people, is actually 8 people per hole. But it was 2 groups of 4, so the foursome in front would go, and that was like my buddy and a couple other people, and whatever. The more we drank, the more we drove balls into them, and the more they would turn around and just hit our balls right back at us. So
it's like that scene from the movie Sideways, which, by the way, you should watch. It's excellent. But there's a nice golf rage moment in this movie.
Yeah, it was a good time. Raised money for a good cause and all that good stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. What about you? What did you do this weekend, Paul?
I spent most of the weekend in my basement.
That's what it looks like.
Finishing the floor in the part of the basement where we had the flooding from the sewer backing up and ruining the carpet. We had always been my father had done this for him. He's an idiot. And he had made this office out of this room and with a bathroom next to it. And the bathroom had carpeting in it too, which we always hated. And we're going to replace that as well. We haven't done the bathroom yet, but not exactly like a DIY guy. My wife and I are actually pretty proud of the quality of the work that we've done. We had to borrow and buy power tools to do different things. We had needed 2 different kinds of saws. Mm-hmm. We actually purchased what do you call it? Like a power nail gun thing, like an what do we call that?
Nail gun.
Nail gun. Yeah. Which is pretty excellent, actually. It's kind of a, like as a homeowner, like, doing something like this is kind of cool. Doing it right anyway. But there were no level surfaces in this house. Like all the new stuff that my dad had added is all terribly off. Like, so if you think about something as simple as a small bathroom, which is just a rectangle, on one side there's a wall and then there's a door into the shower. And you measure those 2 things separately because we're trying to get the square footage for whatever we're going to put on the floor there. And then we measure the wall that's exactly opposite. The half wall and the shower door, the length of those 2 things together should equal the length of the wall on the far side. You can picture a small room, maybe being off 1/8 of an inch or even 1/4 of an inch. Those 2 things were off 2 inches. 2 inches. And it was one of those things where you're like, there's no way this is right. We'll recheck this. And that's how bad it's skewed. And there's a part in the room that we did already finish out, which I'm actually really proud of. The way this came out is there's a pipe sticking out of the wall a little bit. And so we have to do this molding that goes around the pipe. And how do we do this kind of detail work or whatever? And we did it pretty well, I think. I mean, I'll go out there today that has snapped open or something. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's good. That is.
Yeah, so it was beautiful out, I'm told, and I spent all of that time in my basement and in Home Depot.
Yeah, all I can think about is the title I want to name this show. I won't do it, but Paul embraces Second Amendment, buys a gun.
Yeah, actually, okay. Can I totally just take this podcast down a completely different direction? Because this is just one of the interesting things about moving, I think in any case, is that kind of differences between here and there thing, right? And so when we moved from Boston to Pennsylvania last year, obviously things here are different in some ways. And sometimes those things are better. For example, one of the things I'll point out is that on roads where there's a turn lane or whatever, they actually stagger the lines. And so if there's multiple lanes, they're staggered correctly so that cars making a turn have room to make that turn. It's one of those things you see and you're like, why the frick didn't we do this in Boston? It's so smart. But then there's the things that aren't as good or aren't, or worse or whatever. Yeah. And like, I have to say, like, the drivers here are terrible. Like, they're just terrible. They're terrible in different ways than the drivers in Boston are terrible. Boston drivers are very aggressive, but at least they're predictable. Like, you know what they're going to do. People here can't get out of their own way. So to use the turn lane example, when they have the light, but there are cars oncoming, they don't creep out into the middle of the intersection, which is where they need to be to make the turn. So the light will turn red and they never go. In Boston, every car in that lane would go, right? Mm-hmm. So we had friends out, not this past weekend, but the weekend before. And I was trying to describe this to my friends. And then with them in the car, we had what I will now describe as the ultimate Pennsylvania car moment, which is this. We pull up to one of those staggered turn lanes. We have a red light. It's kind of a T intersection. Mm-hmm. So it's perpendicular to the road, the main road. Cars are going by in front of us. The car that is first in line, which is the only car, is 1.5 car lengths back from the line, which is already staggered, by the way. I mentioned this. It's a benefit of the state. So we pull up behind them. And I'm like, look at this idiot. He's like well over a car length from the line. Mm-hmm. Typical. Like, they can't even pull up, Like, they're doing something to ensure that a line of cars can't get through this light. So we're sitting there, and the light never changes. Cars going in front of us and everything. I'm like, you know what? I don't think this light's going to change. I think that car is so far back from the line that the light's not going to change. We're just going to sit here forever. And while this is happening, cars are pulling up behind us and waiting and waiting and waiting. Cars stop beeping behind us. One guy gets out, drives around, takes a right turn, U-turns on the street, drives by right in front of us. And so I'm like, okay, here's the problem. If I get out of the car and I go tell this guy that the light's never going to change, that's when the light's going to change. Mm-hmm. And then I'll be out of my car like an idiot. And my wife's like, do you want me to go? And I'm like, well, that doesn't seem very safe, but I don't know, maybe. So I beep the horn a little bit. I can see them look back at me in the rearview mirror, do one of these things. And I'm like, move forward. And they're like, and I beep the horn again. She rolls down her window and she motions for me to go around her. Now, this is a double yellow line that I would have to drive in the other traffic, And I'm like, no, move forward. So she doesn't move forward. So my wife's like, do you want me to get out of the car? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, be careful, obviously. Mm-hmm. So she gets out, she goes up to the car. My wife is a lot less threatening to me, right? Yes. Than me, right? You imagine, like, me walking up to the car, it could get ugly. So she knocks on the window, and the woman's like, what? And she says, you're 15 feet away from the line. It's not going to change unless you pull up. And she goes, well, and then she just rolls forward. My wife gets back in the car. The light turns green immediately because now there's a car in the space. And I looked back at my friends and I said, I am so glad you were here to witness that. Because I'm going to tell this story someday to people, but it's not going to have the full effect of the insanity of being that, like, of that lack of situational awareness. That's Pennsylvania in a nutshell. That is the whole driving experience here in one thing. That's exactly what they're like.
I mean, to be fair, she was probably used to having her horse and buggy, and the horses actually would have been on that position to change the light.
Yes, right. Yes. But I from behind the car, I thought it was like a car length, and my wife was like, "No, it was like 15 feet." She wasn't even. I mean, it wasn't even a car length. It was like a car and a half.
Which is about a half a car length too many to get that thing to trip.
Yeah, so I love it here. People are really friendly.
Anyway, I think we have some show notes.
Oh, do we? Okay.
Yeah. Apple Music is now inching up on Spotify, which this shouldn't be a big surprise to anybody. But
well, yeah, I mean, this is kind of a microcosm of the whole Apple thing, right? They're 13% of smartphones worldwide, or whatever the number, 14, somewhere in there. When you look at it in the United States, it's 50-50. I mean, there is a duopoly in the United States in smartphones, and it's very even. They have a very captive audience, a very rich audience, an audience that is inclined to spend money on their other products and services. It's a beautiful thing. So yeah, Spotify worldwide is much, much bigger than Apple. Spotify in the United States is the same size as Apple, and by the end of the year, Apple's going to be, if not significantly bigger, then at least notably bigger. I mean,
Yep.
it's an amazing example of why, the iPhone as their core product is able to drive these other services. And when you look at Microsoft's or Apple services revenue and how it goes up every quarter, they're able to milk that market in ways that Google can't, frankly, with Android. And there are other things around this. You've seen the numbers recently around like App Store numbers and what developers make money and where they make money and so forth. It's always higher on the Apple side. Same thing. Even though that market is technically smaller, a lot smaller, it's very lucrative.
Yep. It's what Microsoft wanted to do with Windows 10 and Groove, but did not.
Well, yeah, I how could Microsoft ever do that? It never made sense. I mean, I appreciate that they did it. I like the service. I used it for many years. I mean, way back, going back to Zune, obviously. But, when Apple does this kind of thing, you're like, yeah, of course they're going to they'll wait forever to do a subscription service. Steve Jobs infamously said that people wanted to own, not rent music. And, now they're all of a sudden a giant, in this market that he hated.
Yep.
Of course.
Yep. And then another bit of randomness came from, I think the publication that wrote this up initially was CRN, which is an Asian Pacific news source. It looks like Microsoft's opening a store in Taiwan. That's not, people might think that's very random, but I think just about every laptop in the world comes out of there. So,
well, I think the random nature of it, unless I'm misunderstanding the story, is that it appears to be a Surface store.
Oh, right? Is it really?
I think so. I mean, that's how Mahedi wrote it.
Again, not surprising because all the Surfaces are probably built 30 feet from there.
Yeah, that's right. It's like the back door of the store opens onto the manufacturing floor. That could be. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, I welcome Microsoft opening more stores everywhere. I mean, internationally as well as the United States. It's another great thing that Apple's done. The retail store thing, when they opened it, seemed like a huge mistake. Gateway had just exited that market. How is this ever going to be successful? But it's turned into a place where people can go and see these things locally with their, and get their hands on them and get service, which is huge. When you talk about doing something like buying any other phone and buying an Apple iPhone and you need service, I mean, being able to go to the manufacturer for that is amazing. Does anyone even like going into a Best Buy? And if you buy something online, I mean, what then? What happens when something goes wrong with it?
Yeah. I don't mind going into Best Buys. It's more of just like a browsing thing, though. It's not like I don't think I'd ever buy a computer from there. But I
feel like Best Buy is almost a nostalgia thing for me. It reminds me of the 1990s. I was so happy. When we moved to Phoenix in '93, that's the first time I'd ever seen a Best Buy. I think it was a West Coast chain that basically moved across the country. So being in Boston was one of the last areas to get Best Buys. But we had local chains like Leachmares that were kind of served that purpose. Those are obviously long gone. And of course, then I saw Best Buy and I thought, this is the greatest thing in the world. Like, this is amazing. And now I go in there and I'm like, maybe if it was an emergency and I needed like a dishwasher or something. But even then, I don't know. Best Buy just doesn't really factor anymore for me.
I buy peripherals, I think is.
Yeah, like if you absolutely need it right that second. Well, actually, I'm sorry. We just had my daughter's car stereo installed there. And I should, God, I should, how could I forget that? So we purchased it there. It was probably a couple $100. You needed to buy $50 worth of parts. They have to match the, the inset and the car and all that stuff. I should say that. I'm sorry. I'm kind of dumping on it. That experience was extremely positive. Those guys were fantastic. They did a great job. They even called at some point during the install, and they were like, "Hey, I told you we couldn't do this thing. It had something to do with the steering wheel controls. Actually, we can. It just requires a $40 part, which we have in stock. So if you want this," and I was like, "Absolutely, I want that. That's amazing."
Yeah.
I found that whole experience to be very positive. So that was really nice.
Well, good. And then to wrap it up here, Paul, you did some sleeping.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know how to write about mattresses. Right, I'm a little outside my comfort zone here. So, I did kind of a quickie background on the whole mattress situation, which I won't bore you with here. And then, I've had 4 nights on this thing. The most notable thing to me was I woke up one morning. I think it was Saturday morning, and I felt something I don't feel regularly. I'm a terrible sleeper. I mean, and when I say terrible, I mean I make mistakes. I flop around a lot. I'm just not. I'm just not. I don't wake up refreshed. This is not an experience for me. I did though I think it was Saturday morning. I was laying there on my back, which is a terrible position for me to sleep in normally. And I was just laying there, and when I kind of become aware of waking up a little bit, I'm also aware of me having to move around.
Yeah.
Flip onto my stomach, onto my side. I'm all over the place. But I was just laying there completely comfortable. Like I didn't feel any. I don't know what the need is in my body to move. I don't know what it is. If it's some kind of cramping or whatever causes it.
Mm-hmm.
But I was literally aware of not needing to move, and how comfortable it was. Mm-hmm. And I got up and I was like, man, that's impressive. Like this is what it must be like to be normal. What a wonderful thing. But interestingly, because I wear this Fitbit thing, I can see the quality of my sleep to some degree.
Yeah.
And so I ran downstairs and I turned on the phone. I synced the device. And for the third time since last August, I got 8 hours of sleep, which I never do. But more important, you could see it, they have a quality bar. So it's like a straight blue line, and then there's little lines that interrupt it, and that's all the times. Mm-hmm. Usually it looks like it's got lines all over it, huge blocks of unrest or, of me moving around or whatever it is. And this one was like a couple little blips in the beginning, and then like 6.5 hours of like solid nothing, just sleep. So I don't know. Is it the mattress? Is it just would any mattress have done this? I don't know. I only got the thing. It's
the 5th of whiskey you drank before.
Yeah, that's right. The copious amounts of drugs that I did that night. No, I don't know, but all I can say is that kind of sleep for me is really rare, and it did happen since I got this thing. So that was, it was nice. So I'll keep, we're obviously keeping it. We're going to keep using it, and we'll see if I develop like a Homer Simpson shaped, body outline in the bed from the weight of my body, or I don't know what happens. It's like a foam thing. I don't, we'll see. But
I'll be curious.
It's really comfortable. Yeah.
Because we need a new mattress here at some point. So
yeah.
You got anything else, Paul, before I hack up some more mucus?
No, I guess not. I mean, I have my standard stuff. I have a couple of device reviews I'd like to get to this week. We are going on our home swap all of a sudden very soon. So a week from Friday is when we fly. And at some point I'm going to have to start getting ready for that and thinking about what I'm going to bring, with technology wise and so forth. But that will probably happen several days from now, a few days from now, whatever. How about you, aside from your captain trips?
Nope, nothing. The only thing, I have no travel coming up. My wife is going to Boston, but that's it.
Yeah.
So
nice.
Cool.
I hear it's a nice place.
Especially since you're
drivers are idiots. Make sure she doesn't get in a car.
No, she shouldn't. Well, she's going to have to get in a car, but she's definitely not driving, which is good. So, all right, folks, that wraps it up for today. Oh, my God, I screwed that up. Hit the wrong button.
How could you have screwed that up?
Yeah, I've never done that before. That wraps it up for today, folks. We'll be back tomorrow with a very fun-filled episode because that's what Tuesdays are. Catch you later.